morning to all of our friends who have joined us today. Um, Welcome to the AWA Agora Talk Show, our season three, first episode. We're very happy to be back after a break of a few weeks to launch a third season. As several of you already know, we started this in September of last year, um, in the middle of the COVID pandemic here in New York, and as a way of staying in touch with our friends, continuing dialogues, and be able to spend time with each other on a weekly basis. And since then, we've had 32 guests. Our guest today is our 33rd guest, and our YouTube channel, which we request all of you to subscribe to, is growing very quickly because the topics that we are bringing to our talk show are essentially diverse, but with the main purpose of facilitating thought leadership. So, having said that, welcome again. It's wonderful to have you here. And please remember to pose your questions as we go through the talk. If they're big picture questions, we'll probably keep it towards the end. But if they're clarifications, then I'll try to um, interject without breaking our speakers' flow. Today, we have very happy to host for our first show of season three, Josh Chaiken. He is a principal at Kohn Pedersen Fox here in New York City. I met him 5 years ago at a conference in Toronto, and I was particularly impressed, impacted. I still remember some of the slides from his presentation on food, nourishment, and place. So today we are here to have I'm resisting all the puns of, delicious, yummy, flavorful conversation. But it's going to be a fantastic take on, how food, nourishment, and place are interwoven from an architectural perspective. So on that note, please join me in welcoming our guest, Josh Chaiken. Josh, it's good to have you here. Thank you for taking the time.
Not at all. I've been looking forward to it. So thanks for inviting me.
Definitely. I mean, I was thrilled to have had the conversation with you leading up to this, and I'm thrilled that you're in your kitchen.
I am indeed in my kitchen. We felt this would be a good thematic location, and it also saves me from sitting down too much. So it has that double benefit to it.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So, Josh, what I would love to start with is for our audience, just share with them a little bit about your journey, about your major milestones and what you do and how you got to incorporating these elements of food, nourishment, place in your architectural dialogue.
Mhm.
And I know you have you have slides and presentations you want to share, so whenever you want to pull
Okay.
that up.
Right. Yeah. There's a bit of a slideshow kind of survey journey that we can go through in a minute.
Mhm.
As far as what has kind of brought me to this interest, I guess, or this focus, um, I think it goes to two really simple things. One is that um, as long as I can remember, I've always liked food. And at some point along the way, I started practicing architecture. And so I've been doing that now for a while, and most of that time practicing at KPF. But they were separate. It wasn't as if I started practicing architecture to get involved in doing things related to food as much
Mm.
as I enjoy food. Um, so this has become something that I discovered along the way, um, and really, Abby, since we met and when I uh, made that presentation and developed that presentation, I'm still trying to sort through those ideas. So in a way, this talk is still very much like a work in progress of how architecture, placemaking, food, nourishment, how those things overlap with each other.
Hmm.
So in a way, the opening slide that I've created, maybe that's a cue for the opening slide. This was something that I actually finally decided to make last night, because I thought there should be an opening slide that sort of speaks to the subject. So you can see in its raw, it was a rather quickly assembled slide, and it states really the premise of what I wanted to explore and discuss, and just also see what your thought, what other people's thoughts are about this. And it's about placemaking, wellness, and how food is this sort of overlap, this sort of binding agent between these two ideas, between these two concepts. So as I said, this is something that I hadn't really been thinking about when I began practicing. But then if we go to the next slide, there was a project that I was working on in, I guess this is the mid-90s. This is the Grand Hyatt Tokyo, and it's part of the Roppongi Hills project, a really large mixed-use project in Tokyo. And this is the first hospitality project I worked on. And it was kind of a revelation. The president of Hyatt International at that time, a man, his name is Bernd Koringel, was kind of a visionary for Hyatt International. And once we produced a basic diagram for this hotel, how it would be massed, how it would be organized, he looked at it and he then directed a food and beverage program for this project. And his idea was to populate the podium rooftop, the lower portion that's even lower than in this picture here, to populate it with glass cubes that would have restaurants in them and set within a kind of a garden space on that rooftop, and then connected to the shopping mall that was in between this hotel and the tower you see in the background. So if you go to the next slide, you can see an image from that rooftop space and looking into a couple of the restaurants here. And this was clearly, for me and people working with me, it was, as I said, kind of a revelation how the restaurant component could establish such a strong sense of placemaking, that the food, the restaurants became an attractor for people not just wanting to visit the hotel, but visiting the whole Roppongi Hills complex.
Sure.
So there was no doubt here that there was something going on that at least I hadn't experienced so far, and it was exciting for us. That this wonderful food experience was part of the architecture. Of course, the interior designers came in, and you can kind of really transparently see where the architects work, the interior designers work, the landscape. Everybody just kind of sort of came together, collaborated to create this environment. And it is an idea or a concept that we've carried on with a number of the other projects I've worked on since.
Many years ago, I was working on a project with Maki-san, Fumihiko Maki in Tokyo, and I stayed in Roppongi Hills, and I visited your hotel, and it was quite remarkable how the spaces come together, how the grand stair kind of, does that celebratory moment of, tying the lobby together. Quite a compelling project. And of course, all of Roppongi Hills is a benchmark for many mixed-use developments. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, it's still a fun. It's not as if it's that old, but it's still, I guess, in the generations of hotel and mixed use, it's been around for a while. It's still, I think, holding its own. It's still a fun place to visit. And this is another one in that sort of along those lines, it's sort of trajectory of hotel food and beverage, engaging the public. This is a little terrace cafe in the Andaz Hotel in Shanghai, part of the Shintendi development. it's yet another along the in that tradition of creating food and beverage venues in hotels that are destinations in and of themselves. So they attract many guests who aren't actually staying at the hotel. And part of their appeal is and this is the one in Suzhou, part of their appeal is how they engage the public realm as well. So this is a second, on the second level, it's a terrace overlooking a park, a waterfront park in Suzhou. So you can see the bar, cafe on the right. I think the next image takes you inside. And so again, here's that sort of interface between the work that we do as the architects, the kind of the base building, creating the and working with the interior designers who have, created the this wonderful interior environment for the bar and the cafe. So while we've been working on these, I've been doing these hospitality projects, which I very much enjoy because of their, at least partially because of their food and beverage component. I think this so far addresses how the projects we work on can engage placemaking, to some extent. But then, we've been talking about this other part of the Venn diagram, wellness, and how does that come into play here? So thanks. Yeah, here's one of the wellness kind of ideograms from that I just grabbed, and I would say that on this wellness diagram, the two emojis that we're talking about are the apple and then the person with the arm stretched out next to the apple, because to me that represents community in a way, people coming together. And so the apple is what we eat, it's health. The arm stretched out is community. These are both parts of wellness. And so I wanted to think about and maybe talk about further how this layers onto projects that these hospitality projects, any projects we're involved with, that I've been involved with. And the next slide then speaks to that, I think, in a fundamental way, because I was thinking about this in its most elemental version, that the table, in a sense, is like the architecture that we create. It's creating a space, and it's somewhat neutral. You could admire the table in and of itself or not. You may or may not like the furniture, but it does have a function, but it's empty. Then if you go to the next slide, you introduce the place settings on the table, and it starts to elevate its meaning. It does also hide the table. That's, to some extent, you can still see the form shrouded, but you then understand that this table is a place where people are eating and they're also gathering around in a circle. I think that's one of the wonderful aspects of this, of the Chinese dining experience, at least in restaurants. And then finally, next slide, one introduces the people gathering around the table, the family gathering around the table. And this is where I think it becomes very meaningful, and especially meaningful for us. And it talks about an aspect of well-being and wellness that goes beyond just nourishment. And that's certainly an important part of wellness that is included in food and restaurants and all of that. But it's the aspect of having a table, a space to gather, to meet, whether it is purely social or even, as we get together for working collaboratively. Yeah. So these were some of the things I was starting to think about as a way that we can kind of cycle back and apply then to work that we're doing.
And just very quickly, Josh, one of the things that's really interesting here in this image, compelling in its colors, but what's really interesting is, the food nourishment place, that I'm almost thinking that it's the place that kind of feeds the whole concept of nourishment, because yeah, food is food. I mean, yes, there's, and I'm sure you're going to talk about the farm to table, aspect of food. But I just find it interesting that if you turn it on its head, right, and just looking at this image that you're sharing with us, that is actually the place, the table with the red cloth and the center rotating thing, and that kind of led to a salubrious environment where
Mm-hmm.
nourishment
Mm-hmm.
becomes the aspect of food. The point being that the same food served to an individual sitting in a dark corner
Mm-hmm.
without this beautiful sense of place,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, from our angle, light,
Mm-hmm.
um, that it'll be a totally different experience from a nourishment standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
because that same food is not going to be as nourishing, because this is kind of a
Yeah.
celebration of food, family, etc. So this just
Mm-hmm.
sparked a point, and I'm sure you're going to talk about the farm to cradle approach also. But thank you for sharing. This is quite compelling. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, to me, it really, it sort of helps me understand on a visceral level what it is that we're kind of involved with and hoping to sort of support in the projects that we work on. This is a study that I've been involved with for our offices in New York. We're on 42nd Street, and it's an expansion to our workspace. And what you notice here, the little red arrow indicates where you enter the space, and uh, we've arranged so you enter into the cafe kitchen area of this new workspace that we're developing. And if you go to the next slide, it just shows a kind of an eye level view of that space with the cafe tables and the kitchen in the background. And I think this speaks to some of that same idea of how we're sort of applying those ideas to the workplace, the idea of the importance of creating collaborative spaces that can include food, where you're gathered around food to enhance the wellness of the work experience. There's also something about entering into a workspace that is also the place where people gather to meet and have a snack or a bite, that it also feels kind of more comfortable. So we feel like this is a very fitting both functional and kind of identity representation of who we are and how we work. And I think this is become common for us amongst just in general are people who are working in offices, and for us as architects now, since our work is so collaborative, that it's really meaningful to make this the place where you enter our office. Now, if we go to the next slide, this speaks to where we are right now to some extent. So that's me a few months back in the kitchen where I am right now, and of course in our current situation, working from home, we're missing out on that, at least in person, the direct communal socialization. We can do this as we are doing right now, which is a good virtual version of it, and there's something really focused about it, and it can be really wonderful. And we also realize that we're missing an important aspect of what we, I think, feel is important for us and for our well-being and our mental wellness, mental well-being or wellness. At the same time, I think that this situation has allowed us to focus on other aspects of wellness and in food and in our own placemaking that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to do otherwise. So, we've had more time at home. We've wanted to, curate our homes more, to, think more about what kind of nourishment we're getting. I think I know that I've done a lot more cooking. There I am making who knows what, probably, pasta with tuna sauce or something like that. Um, like many people, I've made more banana bread recipes than I've ever made in my lifetime. So there's been some, great knowledge and learning and, experiences that, we've been able to take advantage of that I think have kind of maybe in some ways looking for the silver lining in this situation. But I would say that at least for me, I'm looking forward to those things both in terms of the work experience and other experiences such as travel that are so I think important for us experientially and also as a way of learning. And the next slide is an image where I was sort of recently reminiscing about some of those experiences. And this is one, this is in Mexico City. It's adjacent to one of the homes that Luis Barragan designed in Pedregal. And there's this, really quite a nice cafe just kind of nestled in next to it. And it just reminded me, and again, reminiscing and looking forward to when we can do this again, of how much one learns from these things, and also again how much or how sort of food, architecture, and place become a kind of an enjoyment and a goal in and of themselves. So there was something in this case here where literally the destination was a wonderful work of architecture to visit, and the destination also had a wonderful restaurant attached to it. And so often, I don't know about, I can't speak for everybody, of course, on this, but I would say my normal vacation experience traveling is designing a day around points where one is eating, that there's, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and those are the destinations. And sometimes they're also, really interesting places in and of themselves, but you're then just sort of filling the space with interesting sites in between. But still, there's something about that moment and the luxury in a way of going to a restaurant and sitting down with the person or the people who you're traveling with to enjoy the food, to talk about what you've seen, what you've done, what you're going to do the next day. So
Josh,
along those lines, and sorry, and Abhay, if you were going to say something, I don't know.
Sorry to, I just have a quick question for you, because
Sure.
this image is quite stunning, and I'm familiar with the project. And I kind of bring us back to New York City, or for many of us who are, dialing in from other big metropolitans cities, that we have this convenience culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have food nourishment place, and then we have a convenience culture,
Mm-hmm.
right? How do you, what are the battles that you face with this 7-Eleven, take it and run, I don't have time for place or nourishment or food? Um, do you feel that that's kind of a uphill task with clients, or most clients are becoming more and more aware of the triangulation that you have mentioned: food, nourishment, place, food, nourishment, wellness, place? Is that too
Yeah,
broad a question?
yeah, no, I think it's not, no, and it's definitely it's sort of an aspect of food and food culture that we have, and it's I suppose universal as well to some extent, where that sort of convenience, at least the one you described, is a little more akin to going, I would say, to a gas station. I need to get a quick fix. I'm really hungry, and I'm happy to have that convenience store there. And I can even remember, occasions when I've, in fact, when I was at some point staying at the Grand Hyatt Tokyo and for a work trip, and I didn't have time to go out for a meal with either people I was traveling or working with. I went around the corner to a version of a 7-Eleven and brought some food back to the room because I I didn't even want to deal with room service. I just wanted something really quick.
I do that
Got
too.
some, rice balls, and I was
Yeah.
happy. So sometimes, so they serve a function, but it doesn't. They don't fulfill that same place in our, um, maybe they don't serve the same elevated place. And I'm being a bit sort of judgmental or qualifying it. They still serve an important function, but
Yeah.
maybe not that same sort of spiritual nourishment.
So your projects are, I mean, essentially, if I extrapolate from what you just said, that the projects that you would like to work on, I mean, if we had our choices all the time, would be the slow food, farm to table uh, food places, right? As against
Yeah.
place where you can grab and run, yeah, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's much more interesting. Actually, that's a great lead in, Abe, to the next slide. Maybe you knew that. So this is another travel image, and this is on the island of Bornholm. In it's a Danish island in the Baltic Sea, and if you speak with a Dane and someone who's been to Bornholm and tell them that you're going to or someone, yeah, and if you tell them that you're going to Bornholm, their eyes might sort of glaze over wistfully, and they'll sort of say, "Oh, Bornholm," and because somehow Bornholm encapsulates, it epitomizes so much so much of the things that are maybe culturally connected to Denmark, and it's about food, and it's about culture, and it's about the things that one loves both about traveling, or if this is your home or near your home, it's what you might love about your place. So this image is of a smokehouse that sort of pepper the coast of some of the around some of the towns in Bornholm, and it's for smoking fish primarily. It's a really interesting, cool building type. They create a very interesting landscape of chimneys in these waterfront towns. But they also speak, in this case, farm to table, or you might say sea to table, that this is also one of the attractions, and especially for people in Denmark, for them to come to Bornholm on a holiday. One of the things that they love to do is go to these big smorgasbords that are filled with smoked fish, and these are family events. So it's a version of what we saw for the Chinese table. This is the Danish table, but it is in this case represented in this rather interesting work of architecture that establishes the place, not the place where you eat specifically, but it still speaks to that, and how the sort of food and the food culture is creating the identity of this place. And in the next slide, again, another image from Bornholm, inland in in Bornholm. It's farmlands, pasture lands. So you really have access to a complete farm to table experience, actual, authentic farm to table experience in Bornholm. And of course, well before people coined that term farm to table, it's just that's what you get here. And maybe you don't get it year round because, of course, it can get sort of chilly in the winter. But it's a wonderful place. And it also, again, sort of speaks to that same kind of travel destination process, and how the sort of food as part of the destination can really permeate everything that one wants to experience and visit and kind of learn from along the way. Go to the next slide. This sort of brings us back to us a little bit more, and how that farm to table idea is being sort of transformed and reinvented in our
Yeah,
cities.
that's Floyd Cardo's.
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
he
Yeah.
passed away a year ago now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I did not
He had
realize
COVID.
that.
He
I'm
had
sorry to
COVID.
hear
Yeah,
that.
yeah. He was the chef at Tabla, and I knew him, and he
Yeah.
was one of the first people in the first month. you know?
Well,
Yeah.
he is here. This is him on the rooftop of the Conrad Hotel. That our office was involved in the sort of repositioning of a hotel project, which was really surrounded in its base, encased by food and beverage venues, including one of his restaurants with Danny Meyer. And so for him, one of the attractions of this location was that he could have and create this rooftop garden that he used in his cooking. And something I think that again, it kind of plays into that very much into the wellness theme, that and the sort of farm to table idea that you of course the idea of providing food that is locally sourced is very appealing. It seems to have a connotate a certain healthfulness to it. It certainly has a sustainable aspect, which is about the health of the planet. So it kind of packs a lot, into that kind of one, really wonderful idea, and you get green roofs in the process. Then looks at transferring this idea in a slightly different way, and this is a project that we're working on that's actually well underway now in Philadelphia. It's a condo, it's a condo on Broad Street that's called Art House. And while we were working on the design, the owner developer had another project in Philadelphia adjacent to which was a community garden. And he saw that a lot of the people who were interested in buying or renting apartments in his building, they were attracted to that other property because of its proximity to the community garden. Whether or not they actually used it, they loved having that nearby, that it sort of created a vibe that people found really appealing. And so he wanted to bring that to this project, which is in a more central location in the city where there's no space opportunity for an adjacent community garden. And he wanted to, I suppose in this case, provide a more exclusive community garden for the community of his condominium project. So you can see here that strip, those are farming plots that if you're an owner in the building, farming, a little space to grow some tomatoes or basil or whatever you want. And then there's a little greenhouse structure planted right in the middle. You go to the next slide, and then there's a little study image of that greenhouse. And again, the idea here is that you can sort of enjoy the garden year round in this case, and and that greenhouse also becomes like a little cafe space. Again, it's sort of creating a place, in this case in a residential setting, that incorporates food and in the production of food in placemaking, in a placemaking experience. The next slide. Now, I just wanted to begin to explore how the concept is scalable. And since much of the work we do starts, or at least a lot of it starts with a master plan concepting, there might be larger blocks. And in this case, this is again back to Copenhagen. It's looking at a market hall in Copenhagen. I think it's called the Torvehallen, and it's actually a pair of market halls that are identical. One serves prepared food, the other is sort of more of your farmer's market. And as you can see, it's surrounded by cafe seating. It's a real magnet. It's a wonderful place to visit. In the next slide, it's an image of it in the market itself. Again, for me traveling, this is like an afternoon for my girlfriend and I. We went here, we kind of checked out, spent a couple of hours just wandering the market, had some food. It was really fun, and we experienced the neighborhood. And so it was something that left an impression on me. So then later on, going to the next slide, when we were working on a master plan concept for this block in Montreal, the client was asking us to sort of find some way to, again, to activate this block and create a neighborhood. And we took that idea of the market, and it's not as if it's so original, but we made the market the centerpiece of this sort of low-rise pedestrian section of the block. And they love that idea. I think, if, of course, every city wants to be prideful of its food culture. Montreal is certainly no exception. Montreal is a great food city. And so this really resonated with them. It resonated with our team. It resonated with me. I kind of also love the idea of being able to incorporate, a market building, which you can see is sort of that little pitched roof building in the center. And they keyed into it so much that they started talking about incorporating not just hydroponics, but the cycle of hydroponics. It includes also farming, seafood, the whole thing, just put it all in there. So they were very excited about this, as were we. In the next slide, again, these were just sort of conceptual sketches. You can see the market building as a magnet at street level. And then in the next slide, how it sort of establishes this place that nourishes the community, both literally providing market food, as well as a gathering place for the community. And then just one last project. The next one takes the idea of how one at a planning level can introduce food, beverage to again augment the and establish a kind of a wellness objective for the plan. This is a painting image of what's referred to as Little Vienna in Shanghai. It's a part of Shanghai that's there's still remnants of it. A lot of it has been redeveloped, but it was really came into being in the early 20th century. There were many. It was established by Viennese, mostly Jews, escaping from Europe in those bad times, and so they established a Jewish community here that also brought the Viennese culture with it, and the Viennese cafe culture. So as we began developing a project, a block plan in this neighborhood or adjacent to this neighborhood, we became aware of this, and our client was very interested in how we could bring this idea into the development of the block that we were working on for him. So in the next slide, here is the block plan, and it's primarily envisioned as a retail block with an office building on it. The blue square is the office building, but it's meant to be developed as a pedestrian environment, a retail block. And in the next slide, kind of diagrams the block programmatically. You can see, or I'll point out what is inside the green rectangle that sort of stretches across near the top. We've designated that as the Viennese Cafe Street, and we thought that was a way to kind of bind the site together and to sort of tie it across from corner to corner and to connect with the primary public spaces. It also carried the theme of that neighborhood, and it also provided a great excuse to introduce cafes and restaurants all along the ground plane of that pedestrian street. And so I'll leave you with the last image, which is a view along that street, which sort of combines the sort of the retail vibe, of course, a nice tree-lined street, which is, if you're familiar with Shanghai, there's a particular kind of tree that's prevalent throughout the streets in Shanghai. So we were really trying to find this almost cultural blending of borrowing some of the historic language from the old Shanghai Viennese neighborhood, and combining that with this kind of reinvented retail vibe. You can sort of see on the right-hand side, these more historic buildings are paired with a little more kind of contemporary lifestyle buildings. So that is where, as far as I've gotten with this exploration, sort of takes us up to sort of more of an urban scale, smaller urban scale look at placemaking, at wellness and food.
Oh, thank you, Josh. This is really quite fantastic. Thank you for sharing your work, your ideas, your thoughts, and I'm sure one day in the near future we will have a book with the same title. Yeah, because clearly the seeds have been sown, if you would, a long time ago, and now it's just kind of forming all these beautiful philosophies. Now we have a lot of questions that have come in as direct messages. I have a few myself, and then there are a few on the chat
Mhm,
that you can look at while I, pose the two questions that I have.
mhm,
Well, first is the curatorial aspect that an architect plays when creating spaces like that. How does that unfold? What are your thoughts on it? As a facilitator for this whole concept of food nourishment place, right? And the second question that's related to it is, what about the human error part of it? That, there's that whole concept of we'll do it, everybody's going to come and eat in this particular way, but then there is that human error with willpower
mhm,
connect. So those are two questions. Then we have about four or five more questions after that. So
mhm.
if you would want to take a stab at it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I I want to take the human error one first, just because in a way, well, I don't think it's not as if it's an easy question, but maybe in the context of this, I would kind of say it's maybe in terms of the food we eat, and that sort of discretion, like you know, and I know we were having this discussion a little bit ourselves about food wellness, that it seems like the actual food and our discretion in what we eat, that that's somewhat less in in our control, if you will. Not that we can control everything, but as architects and designers, we can't tell people what to eat. We can suggest, or we can create venues that might support a certain kind of a diet, or approach to eating. But and I can say this for myself in terms of the human error thing, that there are things that make me happy to eat, that I enjoy eating, that I know aren't good for me. And you were saying that you're like, you love cheese, but you shouldn't eat it. I love spicy food. I know that I shouldn't eat spicy food, that it'll come back, and so there's all of that sort of.
If we just swap, I'll take the spicy food, you take the cheese, we'll be fine. Yeah. We won't have any of those food issues.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah. Well, except there's some cheese I can't eat either, so you wouldn't like that. So, um, so
Okay.
yeah. So that there's that part of it,
Hmm.
that the, if you will, the human error, that in terms of how we can provide for our wellness with food,
Right.
um, that maybe is less about the sort of the project works, that work that we can do. But then the other part is the curatorial aspect of it, which is really what we do. It's what we do all the time. It's kind of, it's the design process, and selecting, or designing a space, crafting a space, what the material is, what the influences are, and it's something that, of course, starts in your own home as well. Since we've been spending more time in our homes, we've been curating, we've been having that much more time to curate, what's in our kitchens, and what are those things that make us happy, or that we like to use, and so when you kind of go back and apply that to the work we do as designers, and you then try and envision what kind of environment you think will be successful, what maybe the client is looking for, what the context is looking for. There's also the interaction, if it's a restaurant, what the owner of the restaurant, the interior designers of the restaurant, what their vision is. So there's while there's a curatorial aspect to what we might recommend, it's also a curatorial aspect that gets melded, blended, scrutinized by the team of people that we're working with.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering that. All right, so let's start with the questions. I'll go with the ones in the chat. What are the three things that are important to you about space and food?
Um,
It's a tough question, yeah.
well, it's yeah, and threes, yeah, three is an interesting. Uh, um, it could be any number, but um, you know, food. What's important about food is, I suppose, what's important to all of us that on one hand we need food to survive to begin with, but there's the enjoyment of food, of actually eating. There are things that we like to eat, what's sort of just what we were talking about, that aren't always the best thing for you. But then the other thing the two other things that I think we all enjoy about food, that I enjoy about, I do like cooking. I like making food. It's just the kind of process of making things, and especially if they taste good. And then if I can share them with people, then that's even better. And then that's the other thing about food that I like, that even if I'm not making the food, if eventually going out again to restaurants and having food with people, it becomes a good reason to go out and both have a nice meal and spend time with people. So it becomes this kind of, in a way, this other object, if you will, that you know, even it can uh, uh, kind of complement the
Mm,
experience of being together.
right.
So that was about food, but I sorry if I lost track of the three. What was it? The three
For
things.
food and space,
Food
space
and
and
space.
food.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean the spaces that I've enjoyed the most, at least when it comes to food, are spaces that somehow enhance and meld with the food eating experience. So I don't know. One of the buzzwords these days is authenticity. And so we've all become really experts at discerning whether something's authentic or not. And there's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
You know, and if something's not authentic, then we're suspicious of it. Then we might even be suspicious of the food, that you're getting something that's kind of Disneyfied. Doesn't mean that it tastes bad. It could still be good food and healthy and fun, but it's maybe lacking in a certain sophistication. So I think I think the kinds of spaces, especially spaces for food, that I enjoy are spaces that are not trying to be something that they're not. So it's not as if it has to be a refurbished warehouse, with tables in it. It could still be a very modern, but it's, as long as it's doing what it does well, and it also, all the better if it somehow is consistent with the food experience.
Mm, true.
I don't know. That's kind of vague, isn't it?
No, actually, I mean, I'm getting it, and I hope the person posed the question is satisfied with that. But if not, they can always be in touch with you directly. That's okay with you, to pose the question. Um, but connected to that, which is interesting, is but a restaurant does look different than a pizzeria,
Hmm.
you know, and I think that's kind of an architectural and food connect, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
have clearly, I mean, if you made a pizzeria look like a Chinese restaurant and a Chinese restaurant look like a pizzeria, we
Uh-huh.
obviously there would be that sincerity, authentic
Hmm.
point that you raised. And I love that point about authenticity, because
Hmm.
the world that we live in with, the previous 4 years were about fake news and all that, you know,
Hmm.
distortions. And so we are all looking for authenticity.
Hmm.
And I really love that point about keeping it authentic and sincere,
Yeah.
because, yeah. But yeah, to the point about the pizzeria and the Chinese restaurant, clearly, I mean, the responses would be different, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. No, and it's actually a whole realm of design, and research in and of itself. Just it's sort of the restaurants themselves, and looking at the way the spaces are organized. If you think about, and what kind of pizzeria is it? But when I think of eating at a pizzeria, that's usually still more of like a booth experience. Even if it's like a high-end pizzeria, then maybe not always. And there are others. But still, it's a very different vibe. And yet, then you've got to have the pizza itself, which is round and kind of suggests that same kind of communal dining in a way. And but you're usually, not always, but you're usually sitting at a rectangular table as opposed to a round table. The pizza itself sort of accommodates the kind of the communal enjoyment of the pizza.
Yeah, on the circular side.
Yeah.
But moving on to, we have limited time, so moving on to our second to last question, which is a quick one. Do you design on an empty stomach, or do you like to design on a full stomach?
Reluctantly design on an empty stomach, and again, this has been one of the silver linings of work from home, is that now it's a lot easier to avoid designing on an empty stomach. Maybe too easy. It can be distracting. It actually reminds me a little bit the sort of distraction aspect of it. When I was in 7th grade in Spanish class, and I would usually be, I'd usually have like a hard candy that I was eating during class, and the teacher felt that I was losing focus because I was paying too much attention to eating my candy, and so I found it helped me focus, but maybe she just found it annoying. At any rate, I think it's a good question. Eating on, it's that's sort of more about food, and it's still about food. It's about food and making things, and
Right.
whether it's of course, if you're just thinking about eating too much, then you're not going to be you might not be paying attention to the work at hand. So
True. Well said. Well, to the last question for today. What's this a project that excites you in the coming 5 years?
Yeah, and I would say, since I don't know what projects are in the coming 5 years, I really don't. And so I like being surprised, and as I kind of mentioned before, finding the opportunities in those projects. I'm hoping that whatever projects come up will have food and beverage components in them, because that adds a layer to them. It seems like most of them these days are having at least some of that, much more. Even the office buildings now. Most of our office building clients, they want cafes connected to their lobbies. They want amenity spaces on the rooftop that have, kind of club food and beverage components. So fortunately, that is really permeating everything. But that to me, I think it's more of a continuum to some extent of what I'm doing. But there's not a sort of particular building type ambition that I'm sort of saying, wow, I really, really want to do this in 5 years' time. It's sort of what it is.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to approach the future. That you love surprises, and you're looking for authentic experiences. And I wish you my very best from all of us at AWA Agora in many successes in the coming future. Please come back to our show, and we love to have you back. And thank you again, Josh, for your time. It was
Not
really
at all. Thanks, Abhay. It was fun doing this with you. So thanks very much.
Thanks for being here.
And thanks everyone for your questions.
Super. So we come to the close of our first episode of a third season. Please join us again in 2 weeks with another notable speaker, a stalwart in color design. He'll be joining us from the UK. His name is Mark Wentworth, and you'll have more information on our social media portals. And please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you all for your support, your feedback, your amazing encouragements over the past 8, 9 months of doing this. Thank you again for being here, and thank you for your support.